Brothers and sisters, to begin our journey in understanding how to survive the Fitnah of Dajjal, we first need to truly grasp what this trial is, because knowledge is our first line of defense. Dajjal is not merely a figure from our textbooks or a story told to frighten children. He represents a trial so profound and pervasive that it touches every level of our faith, our morality, and even our perception of reality. Imagine a world where deception is so convincing, where the glitter of worldly success, power, and influence can be made to seem as if it is coming directly from divine providence, and yet it is the very tool designed to pull you away from your Creator. That is the reality of the Fitnah of Dajjal. He is described as a master deceiver, a being whose influence will test the very foundations of our belief, and who will appear as a savior to many while in reality he is the ultimate misleader. To survive this fitnah, the first step is recognition. One cannot fight what one does not understand. Dajjal's fitnah is not just physical, it is psychological and spiritual. He will present miracles and wonders that will mesmerize the eyes and challenge the heart. People will see what appears to be truth, but it is an illusion meticulously crafted to lure the unsuspecting. Wealth that seems limitless, food that appears abundant, power that commands respect, and miracles that awe the senses. All of these are tools in his arsenal. He will exploit human desires, greed, and even the noblest of intentions, twisting them to create doubt, confusion, and ultimately deviation from the straight path. This is why the Prophet letter Fdaf emphasized learning about him and preparing ourselves through knowledge. Awareness is protection. But brothers and sisters, recognizing Dajjal is more than just seeing with the eyes. It is seeing with the heart. He will be a test not only for the weak-hearted but also for the learned and the pious. The Fitnah of Dajjal will challenge our understanding of reality, what we trust and whom we follow. It is a test of conviction, a test of clarity of faith, and a test of our ability to anchor ourselves in the truth of Allah's guidance, even when the world appears to contradict it. Every generation has its own trials, but this one is unlike any other, because it will blend the spiritual and the material in ways that can bewilder the mind. What we must understand is that the Fitnah of Dajjal is not just a future event. It is a warning for us in our daily lives. We encounter forms of Dajjalic deception every day, the voices that convince us that shortcuts are acceptable, that moral compromise is harmless, that the glitter of worldly success is worth more than integrity and faith. Recognizing these subtler trials now and understanding the greater trial to come prepares us to stand firm when the fitnah reaches its peak. And so, the first and most crucial step in surviving the Fitnah of Dajjal is awareness, knowing who he is, understanding the nature of his deception, and appreciating the gravity of the test. Without this foundation, no amount of prayer or supplication can fully protect us, because protection begins in the heart and mind. If we can see clearly, if we understand the stakes, then we have begun the journey of survival even before the fitnah touches us. Remember, the one who knows the danger is already better equipped to avoid it, and the one who prepares the soul before the storm will weather it with faith intact. Once we understand the reality of Dajjal and the magnitude of his fitnah, the question naturally arises: how do we protect ourselves from such a trial? The answer begins with strengthening our faith, our Imaan, and grounding ourselves in knowledge. You see, brothers and sisters, faith is not merely an abstract concept. It is the lens through which we perceive the world. It is the anchor that keeps us steady when storms of deception rage around us. A weak heart, easily swayed by the glitter of worldly temptations, is precisely what Dajjal seeks. Strengthening our Imaan is not something that happens overnight. It is cultivated daily, intentionally, with mindfulness and sincerity. Faith is intimately connected to knowledge. The Prophet Fdaf They taught us that seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. And in the context of surviving the Fitnah of Dajjal, knowledge is our shield. We must understand the Quran not only as words on a page, but as guidance that illuminates the path through the fog of deception. Those who immerse themselves in the Quran recognize falsehood when they see it, because their hearts are trained to see through the illusions that Dajjal will present. The knowledge of Hadith, of the life of the Prophet, letter f.d.f.a. of the wisdom of those who came before us, equips us with practical tools for discernment. It is not enough to know the stories intellectually. We must internalize the lessons so that our decisions are grounded in truth, even when the world around us seems overwhelmingly convincing. But faith and knowledge alone are not sufficient if they remain dormant. They must be activated through practice. The regular performance of prayers, the remembrance of Allah, the recitation of Quran. All of these acts are not rituals for ritual's sake, they are lifelines. They create a spiritual muscle within us, a sensitivity to the truth that no outward spectacle can deceive. When Dajjal appears, when the illusions are overwhelming, it is this spiritual discipline that allows us to say no, to stand firm, and to trust in Allah's guidance rather than the fleeting brilliance of a fabricated reality. Brothers and sisters, it is also crucial to cultivate discernment. This comes from reflecting on the signs of truth and falsehood in everyday life. We must ask ourselves what aligns with Allah's guidance and what merely appeals to our desires. What strengthens the soul and what weakens it. By developing this spiritual acuity now, we prepare ourselves for the trials that will come. Recognizing the subtle seductions of Dajjal before the ultimate fitna arrives is a form of preparation that cannot be underestimated. Furthermore, knowledge and faith must translate into an unwavering commitment to uprightness in daily life. One cannot claim to be protected from deception while compromising morals or integrity for personal gain. Dajjal's greatest power lies in convincing people to betray their own principles without even realizing it. By living consciously and with moral clarity, we fortify ourselves against the illusions he will present. And so, brothers and sisters, strengthening faith and knowledge is not an abstract concept. It is practical, daily, and deliberate. It is the preparation of the heart and mind, the cultivation of spiritual muscles, and the alignment of our actions with divine guidance. It is this combination that will allow us to face trials not with fear, but with confidence, clarity, and trust in Allah. When faith is strong and knowledge is internalized, the heart becomes a fortress that no deception can easily penetrate. Building upon faith and knowledge, brothers and sisters, we must understand that belief does not survive on theory alone. It requires daily nourishment. Our spiritual practices are not optional add-ons to our lives. They are the shield that surrounds the heart. In the face of the Fitnah of Dajjal, grand knowledge without consistent devotion is like owning armor but never wearing it. It is the daily connection with Allah that transforms understanding into resilience. This is why our acts of worship hold such profound importance, especially during times of confusion and moral turbulence. Think about Salah for a moment. 5 times a day we are pulled out of the noise of the world and made to stand before our Creator. This routine is more than spiritual discipline. It is spiritual alignment. Every prayer recenters the heart, reminding us who we belong to and what truly matters. When the distractions of power, wealth, and spectacle flood our vision, Salah grounds us in reality. It teaches us humility when arrogance is glorified, patience when shortcuts are tempting, and dependency on Allah when false self-sufficiency feels appealing. A heart anchored by prayer does not easily bow to illusions. Then there is dhikr, the remembrance of Allah, which polishes the inner core of the believer. Just as rust accumulates on steel, Heedlessness coats the heart when remembrance fades. Dajjal's deception is not simply external spectacle. It is an internal compromise that begins with forgetfulness of Allah. Dhikr keeps the heart awake. When the tongue frequently says Subhan Allah, Alhamdulillah, and Allahu Akbar, the soul stays alert. It becomes harder for worldly myths to compete with divine truth. The believer who remembers Allah consistently is not dazzled by false miracles, because their heart already knows where true power resides. And then, brothers and sisters, there is the Quran, a book not meant only for moments of crisis, but for daily companionship. The recitation, reflection, and application of Quran fortify the mind and purify the heart. Among its many protections, Surah Al-Kahf holds a special place in shielding us from deception, and it is no coincidence that it revolves around themes of faith under trial, false appearances, and divine wisdom that transcends human perception. By regularly connecting with Quran, we train ourselves to see beyond surface realities. We learn that what glitters is not always gold, and what appears weak may carry immense strength. But spiritual practice is not limited to personal rituals. It shapes how we live. The impact of worship shows not only in prayer mats, but in integrity, compassion, and consistency. When worship becomes routine, it disciplines desire. It teaches restraint in a culture of excess and sincerity in a climate of performance. Dajjal will thrive in an age of appearances, where accolades replace authenticity and platforms replace principles. A believer grounded in worship does not chase approval, they chase acceptance from Allah. This spiritual independence is critical to surviving manipulation and pressure. Consistency is the real test. Many start strong and fade slowly. Dajjal's deception will not be a sudden lightning strike. It will be a prolonged storm, tempting people gradually, wearing down resistance through repetition and emotional fatigue. That's why our practices must be habitual, unwavering, and sincere. The believer who prays only when inspired and remembers Allah only when distressed is not fully fortified. Strength comes from steadfastness, from showing up spiritually even when motivation fades. So, brothers and sisters, our daily worship is not small. It is everything. It is how we sharpen spiritual vision, maintain humility, regulate desire, and preserve clarity in an age of confusion. It is how we transform belief into action and knowledge into wisdom. These consistent acts create a barrier around the soul that deception cannot easily breach. Because the heart that stays connected to Allah is never lost in the illusions of the world. Brothers and sisters, as we build faith through knowledge and protect our hearts through worship, we must also develop something that is absolutely essential to surviving the Fitnah of Dajjal: awareness. The trials of Dajjal will not always appear as outright evil. In fact, the most dangerous tests are the ones that appear attractive, logical, even beneficial at first glance. This is what makes recognition so critical. The deception will not simply knock on the door wearing a mask of darkness. It will often present itself clothed in light. What looks like progress may actually be misguidance. What looks like success may quietly be spiritual failure. What feels empowering might only be enslaving the soul. Dajjal's trials are described as manipulations of perception, turning truth into falsehood and falsehood into truth. He will display immense worldly power, wealth at his command, access to food and resources, the ability to grant apparent comfort to those who follow him. People will not choose deception because they are evil. They will choose it because it seems to solve their problems. Hunger will be answered with abundance, fear will be answered with protection, doubt will be answered with spectacle. This is how tests work. They target vulnerabilities. They do not confront our strengths. They exploit our weaknesses. But the reality is, brothers and sisters, these same patterns already surround us. We are living in a world that glorifies appearance over substance, speed over sincerity, and popularity over principles. Our daily exposure to curated realities trains the heart to chase validation rather than truth. Success becomes measured in numbers rather than sincerity, comfort rather than character. These cultural currents are subtle preliminary waves of the much greater deception to come. If we normalize compromise now, if we accept moral shortcuts today because everyone does it, we are slowly conditioning our hearts to surrender when the ultimate test arrives. This is why developing spiritual discernment is a survival skill. Discernment is not cynicism, it is clarity. It is the ability to pause and ask, does this align with Allah's guidance, or does it merely appeal to my desires? Does this strengthen my faith or numb it? Does this lead me toward humility or feed my ego? The believer who trains themselves to ask these questions becomes resistant to persuasion rooted in spectacle and emotion. Dajjal's strength will be the manipulation of emotion, fear, desperation, hope, and only a disciplined heart can see beyond emotional impulse. The tests of Dajjal will not present themselves simply as ideological claims. They will manifest as choices where to place loyalty, what to prioritize, and which voice to follow when conflicting. Narratives collide. The true battleground is not external, but internal. Every compromise we make today chips away at our ability to stand for truth tomorrow. Every time we ignore conscience for convenience, we weaken spiritual reflexes. But every time we choose integrity despite difficulty, we strengthen the spine of our faith. Recognizing the signs also means remembering that not everything impressive is divine. Power does not equal truth. Influence does not equal righteousness. Normalization of sin does not equal moral progress. Dajjal will blur these distinctions to the point that believers must distinguish guidance from popularity, sincerity from spectacle, truth from trend. Those who survive will be the ones whose moral compass is aligned with revelation, not culture. Brothers and sisters, the Prophet letter Fda taught us that these trials will be so intense that even strong believers could be shaken. This is a humbling reminder. None of us is immune. Confidence alone is not protection. Preparation is. The time to build resilience is before the test arrives. By recognizing the small trials as training grounds for the greater fitnah, we discipline ourselves to choose faith over comfort, clarity over convenience, and guidance over glamour. Because when the heart learns to recognize deception in its smallest forms, it will not be fooled by its greatest display. Brothers and sisters, as we speak about awareness and recognizing deception, we must remember that Allah did not leave this ummah without guidance on how to walk through the darkest trials. The prophetic teachings are not abstract ideals. They are a survival manual for moments exactly like the Fitnah of Dajjal. The Sunnah of the Prophet letter Fda is more than tradition. It is divine wisdom translated into daily living. Following that guidance keeps our path straight when the world becomes morally crooked. The Prophet letter Fda warned us about Dajjal with a seriousness unmatched by almost any other trial. He described not only the signs of his coming, but also the psychological and spiritual conditioning that believers need to withstand his deception. He did not merely inform us of danger, he taught us how to avoid it. And that instruction begins with obedience. When we align our lives with the Sunnah, we cultivate hearts conditioned to submit to divine truth rather than personal desire. Obedience trains the soul to prefer Allah's command above societal pressure, comfort, or convenience. This discipline becomes critical when the fitnah requires choosing between obedience and ease. One of the most powerful aspects of following the Sunnah is how it nurtures humility. Dajjal's appeal will thrive on ego, on the illusion of self-sufficiency, superiority, and entitlement. The Sunnah actively dismantles these traits. Simple acts like greeting others first, caring for the vulnerable, lowering the gaze, and serving family quietly build spiritual humility in ways that protect against arrogance. A humble heart is far harder to manipulate than one fueled by pride. When a person knows their place before Allah, they are not impressed by false power or seduced by worldly prestige. The Prophet ﷺ also emphasized protective practices specifically connected to Dajjal, such as seeking refuge in Allah during our prayers and memorizing protective passages of Quran. These actions reinforce a mindset of reliance on Allah. They remind us daily that our safety does not come from intelligence, social status, or preparation alone. It comes from divine protection. That awareness reshapes our approach to trials. We prepare diligently, but we place ultimate trust in Allah. Equally important is how the Sunnah teaches emotional control. Anger, desperation, envy, and fear weaken judgment and open doors for deception. The Prophet ﷺ taught us patience during hardship, contentment during loss, restraint during anger, and trust during uncertainty. These virtues are essential components of surviving major trials. Dajjal's deception will exploit emotional extremes, pushing people toward impulsive choices disguised as survival instincts. But the believer trained by the Sunnah learns to pause before reacting, to evaluate before engaging, and to submit their emotions to faith rather than allowing emotions to override faith. Another profound gift of prophetic guidance is the emphasis on clarity and balance. The Prophet never taught excess nor negligence. He warned against extremism just as strongly as he warned against spiritual laziness. This balanced approach conditions believers to resist manipulation from both sides, neither being swept into spiritual recklessness nor lulled into apathy. Dajjal's deception will push people toward extremes, either blind worship of false promises or complete abandonment of faith for comfort. The Sunnah forms believers who walk the middle path, steady and unshakable, even in daily decision making. Following the prophetic model trains the conscience. It teaches us to prioritize honesty over profit, justice over convenience, mercy over vengeance. These habits ingrain moral reflexes into the soul. When the greatest trial arrives and decisions must be made quickly under pressure, these ingrained instincts will determine who stands firm and who collapses. Brothers and sisters, the Sunnah is not simply a collection of narrations. It is a training program for resilience. It shapes hearts to obey when challenged, humbles egos when fame seduces, steadies emotions when fear overwhelms, and centers the soul when confusion spreads. Because the one who walks faithfully in the footsteps of the Prophet is never walking into deception alone. Brothers and sisters, as we reach this final reflection, it's important to remember that surviving the Fitnah of Dajjal is not meant to be a solitary effort. No believer is meant to stand alone against a trial of this magnitude. Allah created us as a community for a reason, because strength multiplies when hearts unite upon truth. One of the greatest protections granted to this ummah is righteous companionship, people who remind us of Allah when we forget, who steady us when we waver, and who encourage us to choose faith even when the world pulls us in another direction. Isolation is fertile ground for deception. When a person detaches from the community, doubts grow louder, temptations feel heavier, and guidance becomes harder to find. Dajjal's deception will thrive on separation, disconnecting people from authentic scholarship, from sincere believers, and from environments that nourish Imaan. When people exist in spiritual isolation, they become easier to influence, more likely to trust persuasive voices without accountability or grounding. This is why gathering for prayer, study, and service is not just spiritually uplifting. It is spiritually strategic. Righteous companionship does more than provide emotional support. It reinforces accountability. A sincere friend asks the hard questions. They challenge compromise gently but firmly. They remind us when we become too comfortable with behaviors that weaken our faith. They help keep our moral compass properly calibrated. These relationships form a safety net when personal discipline dips or doubts sneak in. No one remains strong forever alone, but together, believers uplift one another through shared reminders, advice, and prayer. And speaking of prayer, dua is our most personal weapon against the fitna of Dajjal. The Prophet ﷺ taught us to seek refuge in Allah from his deception regularly, embedding supplication into our daily prayers. Dua is not passive. It is active spiritual defense. It reshapes the heart, reminding us that protection does not come from self, confidence, or preparation alone, but from sincere reliance upon Allah. When the believer asks for protection, they admit vulnerability, and this humility becomes a shield against arrogance and false certainty. Dua also cultivates dependence on Allah in moments of uncertainty. The trials of Dajjal will blur clarity, shake stability, and challenge conviction. In those moments, the tongue that is accustomed to calling upon Allah finds peace where others panic. Supplication maintains a lifeline between the servant and the Creator. Even when the world becomes overwhelming, it recenters the heart on Allah's power instead of worldly impressions. Beyond individual dua, collective supplication carries unique strength. When communities gather to pray, learn, and remember Allah together, they amplify spiritual resilience. Unity strengthens willpower. Faith becomes a shared responsibility rather than a personal burden. During major trials, believers will not survive by individual knowledge alone. They will survive through collective steadfastness. The Ummah's strength has always flourished when believers support one another spiritually, emotionally, and socially. But brothers and sisters, true community is not built around social convenience. It is built upon faith-centered purpose. Gathering must be rooted in remembrance, learning, worship, and service. Communities that revolve only around entertainment or surface-level interaction cannot offer protection in times of trial. But communities bonded by shared submission to Allah produce individuals resilient enough to face any test together. Finally, we must recognize that surviving the fitna of Dajjal requires humility to acknowledge we need Allah and each other. Overconfidence isolates, humility connects. The believer who seeks guidance openly, accepts support from others, and anchors themselves in prayer walks with a spiritual armor reinforced by divine support and communal strength. Brothers and sisters, the trials ahead may be monumental, but the safeguards Allah has given us are powerful. Faith strengthened by knowledge, shields built through worship, clarity gained through discernment, guidance rooted in the prophetic example, and communities bound by dua and devotion. Because when hearts unite under Allah's protection, no deception can ever divide or defeat them.